You know, I'm not sure that this need to be new is in fact anything that's relevant. Some people, some artists, their breakthrough is newness. I suppose when I began, the coalescing of all of these elements was new. But the point is to be authentic. And so I'm not sure we've ever thought that we should go and do something new for the sake of being new. That's actually ridiculous and part of a kind of decadence of a society, of an art that always wants to be different, thinking that difference was anything better. It's not necessarily better. The national parks was essentially the modulation of all the elements that go into our film, but it would be unique insofar as the main character would be the live cinematography, all the magnificent parks that we've set aside, in conjunction with a set of 50 or 60 historical figures who, like a Russian novel, existed in the foreground in front of that spectacular backdrop. And it was our great challenge to figure out how to organize the stories of the 50 or 60 odd people that we introduce you to, knit their narratives together into something that made a coherent narrative, all the while having this drama play out in front of, I would argue, some of the most beautiful places on earth. You know, I live in New Hampshire. We make maple syrup. It takes 40 gallons of sap to make 1 gallon of maple syrup. Boil, 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 evaporate, evaporate, evaporate. That's pretty much what documentary filmmaking is for me. It's about 40-to-1 shooting ratio, to footage shot to footage used. It varies in different films. On something like the national parks, it's going to probably be a lot more because you're spending a lot of time with live cinematography. But for every archival photograph you see, we've looked at 150 and shot 100 and, you know, had that possibility of putting in, you know, 40 times that much, 50 times that much in any other thing. And the cutting room floor, as I suggested before, is not filled with bad scenes. It's just scenes that didn't fit. You remember the movie Amadeus, a wonderful scene where the arrogant Franz Joseph says to Mozart, "Too many notes." You know, there's a truth to that. You just have to figure out what's gone. And if I showed you scenes taken out of the film, you'd think, oh, what an idiot. He's lost it. Why would he leave this out? But it had a destabilizing effect. And what you serve is a larger whole. Well, as I described before, I was interested in sort of willing these still photographs alive, to explore them with an energetic camera eye, to not hold them at arm's length, to bring them alive, to not only look at them and take them apart dynamically and put them back together in good storytelling fashion, but to listen to them and add complex sound effects, to add period music and first-person voices that would give you the sense, as William Faulkner once said, that history is not was, but is, that for maybe a fraction of a second, you might feel that you are not so much participating, but you could feel what it was like to be there, even with the still photograph.
When you're standing there silently, in the presence of the giant sequoias, you can't help but recognize that you're a part of something that is way beyond whatever it is that you envisage this world might be.
And all of those complex things and thousands of other things I haven't told you about are what now gets reduced to a shorthand called the Ken Burns effect. Essentially, Steve Jobs called me up 6 or 7 years ago, I guess it was now, and asked me to come out to Cupertino, California. He and some classically nerdy technicians had been working on this thing which their working title was the Ken Burns effect, that allowed people who downloaded photographs to pan or you know, I mean, zoom or pan on them. And they had perfected it, and this was November, and every Apple computer from then on would have that as its basic software starting that January. And they wanted to keep the name, and I said I didn't do commercial endorsements. But we worked it out where they gives me equipment which I give to nonprofits. And I allowed them to use the name. And so all of a sudden it sort of seeps in the consciousness, and the Ken Burns effect for anyone who has an Apple computer is a part of the lexicon. And it's one of those classic examples where the technological tail is wagging the dog of a much more complex thing. But the spirit, Steve's spirit, was exactly right, that we don't want to have a relationship to images that is just at arm's length, that we want somehow to penetrate the proscenium, as we would say in theater, that get beyond the artificiality, the plasticity of imagery, into some moment that might have something that we could learn, in which 1 and 1 would equal 3. That if you put this image next to this image, that the combination of the two would be greater than the two images themselves. It's the metaphor, as I'm suggesting all during this conversation, for life, for art, for what we're here for. It's what a scientist will tell you thereafter.